Okay. So, as Rick mentioned, I should have probably given a little bit more of my background. All three of our college counselors have worked in admission as well at different colleges. So, Thad Roby, our director, worked at Colorado College, so a D3 school. Christine Woods worked at Boston University, which is Division One, and I worked at Brown, which is Division One, but like with a kind of different take on it. At admitting athletes because they have to be within a certain range for an Ivy League school. And I did serve on the athletics committee at Brown as well. So I kind of saw how that process worked pretty intimately in that experience. But as Rick said, we work really closely together. We really try hard to make sure that this is a student-centered process. So we want to make sure that the student and the family are heard. We want the student to come out of the process feeling good about whatever choice that they have made, whether it's to continue with their college sport, or in some cases, students go through the process and decide later that they actually would prefer a different school where either they can't play or they don't want the level of play, or they just make a decision to move away from the sport. So we're with the student and the family kind of through the entire process. And our goal is really, and I know this is athletics department's goal as well, to get the student thinking about why are they going to college. It's not just about usually just about playing the sport. What role do they want the sport to play in their lives, which Rick will talk about later, the different levels of play that the student can participate in college. What kind of life do they want to have in college? Do they want to join a fraternity or sorority? Do they want to do a lot of community service? Are they going to be able to fit that in playing a Division I sport? That's something they'll have to kind of figure out. And so those are what we kind of take the student through as well. Another thing, as Rick mentions, is we have kind of a different angle than a lot of maybe the club coaches. I think our Thayer coaches are awesome at seeing kind of the whole person. And a lot of club coaches are too, but we do have a different angle in which we're really trying to figure out what's best for the student, and not from just the sports perspective. So we're really taking them through the entire process of examining what do they want to study. A lot of coaches will push students, for example, to take their tests early. And we really push back on that. Students don't do as well when they take their tests early. We have PSATs as benchmarkers, and we can walk the student through the process of talking to a coach and not getting them kind of in this testing mode where they're going to end up taking so many more tests if they usually start too early. So things like that we're looking out for. So in terms of our calendar timeline, I know a lot of you have the camera off, which is fine, but usually we ask, how many people have a freshman, how many people have a sophomore, how many people have a junior, et cetera, in this process. I'm guessing most of you in this meeting have a sophomore or junior. That's typically what happens. So we always meet with sophomores one-on-one. Every sophomore in the sophomore class at the end of the sophomore year. So some point during the spring, we will meet with sophomores individually. And that's like a 20-minute meeting to touch base with the sophomores. Usually for student athletes, it's a much more focused meeting. They may have already even talked to coaches, but that's where we get them kind of on board thinking about the recruiting process, what types of schools might be good academic and athletic fits. We turn them back and say, go talk to your coach and figure out what's a good athletic fit, and then we can kind of discuss academics within that. We talk about testing, but the timeline does tend to move a little bit more quickly, or at least start a little earlier for a student that's going to compete athletically in college. So we are aware of that. We start meeting with them, in the spring of their sophomore year. There have been cases where a highly talented student athlete or a particular sport, they really need to meet with us in the fall of their sophomore year, and we're happy to do that. We just would rather have communication with the student and family rather than have it as this big surprise of the student is committed to this school and we're trying to, retrofit classes and things like that to make sure that they're still viable for admission, for example. So that's kind of the sophomore year. We also meet 2 times with the sophomores in a classroom setting, and we go over things about mainly trying to do like an interest survey to see what are they talented in, what things might they want to study, trying to get them think a little bit outside of the box of just math, science, English, et cetera, and what else is out there and what types of college experience they might be looking for. But we don't do a deep dive with them because a lot of sophomores are not ready for that experience. Then junior year, in the middle of junior year, about December, January, we really rev up the process with all of our juniors. So we start meeting with them in the classrooms, we start meeting with them individually, and that's really a focus on the college search and the application process. And many of our student athletes are well into that process already by that point. And we're just kind of helping them move through that, helping them come up with language to talk to their coaches, which I know our coaches are as well, helping them come up with language to talk to college coaches and things like that. And feeling confident about kind of their process and things like that. We also work with them, unless they've kind of committed, which we do have students who have committed at that point. We also work with them to think a little bit about what some people call a broken leg list, which is essentially thinking about what other colleges might they be happy at if they didn't play a sport. And sometimes this coming up with this list actually makes the student realize that they don't want to play the sport, but more often than not, it's just a kind of a plan B. Let's think about the whole picture so that if things start to fall through, which I'm sure Rick will talk about this year's seniors, it was a little bit more difficult because of COVID, that we have these other schools that the student can see themselves attending and be happy at, which is the most important thing for us as a college counseling office and you, I'm sure, as a parent. So how do we kind of communicate between the two departments? We actually communicate pretty regularly during the process. Actually, before you all popped on, Rick and I were going through the students who we had known had committed and things like that. We keep a running spreadsheet. When a student tells us that they want to play in college, we keep a running spreadsheet and share that with the athletics department, just so we all are cross-referenced and we all have everyone on our radar screen, and we don't miss anyone kind of along the way. We also talk often, for example, I feel like I talk to Brian Sabelli, who's our girls hockey coach, several times a year, or Jeff Toussaint, who's our football coach, just staying on the same page about who they're in communication with. Those two sports, especially boys football, tends to be a later recruiting process. So it's important that we're all on the same page, and we have really regular communication with the coaches just to make sure that, you know, sometimes things get misinterpreted by a student and that by the time it gets to us, it's not quite the same thing. So making sure that we all know where we are and working in the best interest of the student, which is really our main goal, is that your child is happy with their college choice, whether they're playing sports or not. More often than not, if you're in this meeting, they will be playing sports. So that's our main goal. And as Rick said, mainly just keeping us in the loop. I have a student who committed sophomore year to play lacrosse, and his mom just sent me an email saying that, you know, this was all set and that was all set and things like that, where we just all know where everyone stands is the most important thing. And we can kind of jump in and advocate for the student where need be, or give you maybe some advice to think about that's not what is coming directly from like a club coach or a college coach even. Sometimes we can get on the phone with admissions and say, hey, this came from the college coach and this doesn't sound right to me. And the admission officer at that school will say, oh, no, that's not true. This is how we're going to do it in admissions. So for sometimes the college coach will want the application in October, and the admission officer is saying, I'm not even going to look at it till November. So things like that, where we can talk directly to the admission office and get kind of the real scoop on that. So that's our role. But really, this is more about kind of the recruiting process and how to navigate that, which is obviously Rick's forte. So I'm going to pass it over to him to talk a little bit about NCAA divisions, and then obviously how to get started and how to keep going with the recruiting process.
All set?
Yeah. Oh, and I should say, we did mention this when some people were still popping in. If you do have any questions, feel free to just kind of pop in and ask them, or if you're really uncomfortable, you can put it in the chat and I can interrupt Rick.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. The questions are great. That helps things as we go. And typically that's sort of how this goes in person. It's quite a bit of Q&A during the conversation. So you don't have to wait till at the end, as I ramble on, I will jump in with saying if anybody has any questions. So as we go kind of one part at a time. The first thing I like to talk about the college process of playing collegiate athletics is, do you make sure when you're going through the process as an athlete, a parent, et cetera, that you know that the individual really wants to play at the next level? That it's a commitment. It's a big part of what you do at the collegiate level, Division I to Division III. And some kids, it's just not for them at the end of the day. A lot of kids sometimes think it's just like Thayer another 4 years and it's part of their thing. It's not. It's different. It's not a great experience, but there's a lot to it. So I think most people who are pursuing or are being recruited are in the know enough to understand that it is a big commitment. They want that commitment. I would then say, if that's the case, understand the difference of a Division I commitment and a Division III commitment. A Division I commitment is awesome as far as I'm talking about commitment of time, energy, difficult to pursue other things, frankly, within the academic world. But it's a big deal. Division III, it's a big deal. My daughter's playing Division III lacrosse, and it's 5 a.m. lifts a couple days a week. It's afternoon practices. There's different things. There's a lot to it. So, but at the same time, the Division III commitment is dramatically less than a Division I commitment, especially depending on the sport. So I just say to kids, look at what you really want to have in your collegiate experience. And I'll tell you firsthand, my daughter was a Tweener Division I recruit. We were going that road when she was a sophomore and all that stuff. And she talked to a lot of her friends. We're blessed that Thayer has had such a rich tradition in girls lacrosse that we have kids playing at all levels, the highest Division I level to Division III. And she said, Dad, I just don't think that's going to be the right route for me. I want to play. I want a part of my life, but I don't want it to be too much of my collegiate experience. So those are the conversations you want to have. Number one, if you are blessed to be good enough to play at the Division I level. Division II level is different. Division II, there aren't a ton of Division II schools. In the Northeast, there's only one Division II conference, the Northeast, the NE10. So there's not a ton, but that commitment's pretty serious as well, especially if you go outside of New England, and especially the big Division II schools down south in Florida. As far as the levels go, if there's a lot of misconceptions out there. Okay, so at the Division I level, if it's a scholarship situation, is when you hear about letters of intent and things like that. The Division I scholarship schools are different than, say, the Ivy League schools, most of the Patriot League schools and how they do it. So the Ivy League schools are considered Division I, but they're non-scholarship schools. Those schools are all based on money, on financial aid, and you don't sign a national letter of intent. So if you were offered officially by a big Division I school a scholarship, that means that's going to happen. You will get in. They usually will they have different times they can send. It's typically in July where they can actually send you they can offer you earlier. Remember, offers they typically I would say most offers from a Division I coach, if they officially offer you, they will honor it at the scholarship level, but you won't really have 100% confidence in that until you get your they'll send to you a offer sheet and you sign it, and then that leads to, which is usually in middle of the summer. The Ivy Leagues, what they can do is the Ivies can send what they call, if they've kind of said, we want you to apply early, Yeah, you're one of our top people. The admissions officers can send what they call a likely letter, which will let you know that, admissions looks really good, basically. The Ivies did that. Nellie knows this probably a little bit, but the Ivies did that to kind of help their coaches not have people all nervous that they have to wait until they get their early decision admit, while the scholarship schools are kind of scooping them up, so to speak. So kind of help them where they are. Division two, it depends on the program, depends on sport, but Division two does offer real money, does offer scholarship money as far as you can sign a letter of intent with them as well. And then Division three, there's no official athletic scholarship money. But pending on the school, the big thing with Division three, and this happens in the other school, in some of the Division ones and Division twos as well, depending on your situation. But the Division threes, what they give is, depending on the situation, merit money. So the merit money can be based how they want to use it, which is on academic profile, which is huge as far as, all of this. And also the athletic piece can help. So the merit money just means what is school given money that basically you don't have to pay back. It's an interesting process, which is a big deal at the Division three level, because some Division three schools actually give more merit money than others. And frankly, that really depends on the prestige of the school, in all honesty. The NESCAC schools will not give as much, that's like the Bowdoin Bates, Amherst Williams, won't give as much merit money as, say, I'm just using New England, the Roger Williams, the Endicotts, the Salve Reginas, et cetera, because they're using their merit money at those levels to kind of compete against the NESCACs to get quality kids. So that's a little bit long-winded on that, but the point is there's a big range. The other thing to understand is full scholarship money. So when you hear somebody say, "Oh, I got into Harvard, I'm going on a full ride," it's not true. It's just not. I mean, it's so they either qualified for whatever their finances were for a tremendous financial aid package, or they got they got a decent financial aid package, or they just like feeling good about saying that they got a full ride when they're actually paying the tuition. But the reality is that isn't the case. At the Division I level, the major Division I level, the thing to understand is scholarship money varies greatly. I'm not going to go into it right now with every sport. I mean, if there's sport-specific questions, I'll take those. But the only programs in all of major Division I athletics that are fully funded programs are football and basketball. So that means unless you're a walk-on, every single kid on a major football program or a major basketball program, no matter what their financial situation is fully funded. But it's put my baseball hat on. At the Division I level in baseball, it's only 11.7. So basically that means to fill an entire baseball program, which is in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 kids, there's only 12 full scholarships available. That's what happens in almost all the other sports. So how the coaches work it, you'll hear this term and you may have already heard it, but they might offer 40%. They might offer 50%. So that's kind of that merit money thing I was talking about, where it does kick in the scholarship. So for example, if Boston College recruiting you for baseball and it's $60,000 to go to Boston College right now, they could offer you 50%. So it's very rare in those sports that people get the full money because they need to spread it out. So they feel that so what it does is it allows a family to say, okay, now I'm on the hook for 30,000 instead of 60,000, if that makes sense. So we can get into that, but each sport, I think maybe the only other sport that's fully funded is actually girls crew, which is interesting because there's certain sports that are easier to get to the next level than others, because most high schools, for example, don't offer crew. So keep that in mind as well when you're going through this journey. The other thing I'd just say is, don't get too stressed. I mean, it's a journey, it's a process. If your kid's a good high school player, and I've said this before, my kids went through it, and I've said it for years. High school athletics is a wonderful thing. Enjoy it while you can. It goes fast, and don't have your kid, and don't as a parent get overly stressed on the next level stuff. If your kid's good and your kid can play, and that's what they really want to do, our coaches, myself, college counseling, we're going to find a home. I can't guarantee you where that's going to be, but we already have. In 2021 was an absolute horror for the 2021 class. COVID was a horror show, especially the spring athletes for this. So I dealt with it directly as a parent. But still, we had Saturday who have already had official either celebratory letters given from the Division III level, or likely letters from the Ivy level, or letters of intent from the Division I level. We already have 3 boys hockey players, 3 football players, 1 boys soccer player, 2 girls soccer players, 2 boys lacrosse players, 2 baseball players, 2 girls lacrosse, and 1 cross country. We typically say our class is about 100 plus kids, senior class. Typically, we have that go on to play at the collegiate level about 25 to 30. So it's a pretty good percentage. And we're we're here to work with you and go with it. But enjoy the run while you can. It can be stressful at times, but of course, use the resources of us, college counseling. We try and work hand in hand with club coaches when need be. Not anti-club by any stretch. I work in a club baseball program that helps greatly with kids in the showcase world and all that stuff. So any questions on that stuff, Nellie, we want to go to before I get into some other things?
Actually, one of them is just about classes, so I can address that. But someone had asked about how do you know that the students are taking the correct classes for NCAA guidelines, and how do you know they're also taking the correct classes for what they actually want to do in life, which is more important. But basically, when a student comes in as a first-year student player, there's no way they're really going to graduate without the correct NCAA guidelines. If they don't pass a class, it's a little different, and we'll work with them to figure that out. The tricky piece comes if a student transfers in, and our director of study, Lynette Sumter, will work. She has kind of the worksheet, and she works it out to make sure that the student ends up in the right classes. The things that can be tricky are if a student repeats a year, so they come in they've taken 10th grade, but then they come in and repeat 10th grade at Thayer. That's when things get a little tricky, but we're really used to that. And before we even start them on their path when they enter, we've worked out those details to make sure that the classes the student is taking will translate into NCAA eligibility. And the reason it's a little tricky when they transfer in and repeat a class is because the NCAA only works off the first 4 years of high school. So even if you take 5 years of high school, they don't really care about the 5th year. So anyways, we kind of have that safety net, and we'll make sure they're qualified. In terms of, and the other piece is for NCAA Division I, they obviously have to get a certain GPA and certain testing. It's a little different this year, but and certain testing, and we'll work with the student to kind of figure out where they are on that sliding scale as well. But we usually don't have an issue with that. The other thing about what subjects will lead them to kind of their dream career, or what they want to be an engineer, they're going to have to take certain classes in high school. That's a piece where the advisor for every student at Thayer and the college counseling office, it's one of the reasons we meet with them sophomore year. At the end, we go through course selection, thinking about how to position that student in the right place for what they want to do in college and beyond. And if they don't know, we just try to give them that really well-rounded, that they're challenging themselves, but not overwhelmed, and working with the student on that. So that's just a piece about the courses. Another question actually to you, Rick, is, hold on, where to go? Can you talk of the role of walk-on commitment? Have been people that talk about that as a commitment to the school before the application process. So I'm guessing a preferred walk-on maybe, or something like that. Is that the
Yeah,
question?
there are preferred walk-ons. I would say in general, walk-ons don't happen too often. So for kids, it depends on the sport, of course, but if a kid is not a recruit at any level right now, Division 1, 2, or 3, I would say they rarely make the team, a varsity team. I think for kids who are interested in athletics, what I recommend who are not recruited or don't want that full commitment, to look at the schools who have excellent club programs. You'd be shocked at how strong, especially in the hockey community, club hockey is on a national level. Big schools have big club hockey programs. But you can be a guaranteed walk-on. Now, a guaranteed walk-on, though, is different. A guaranteed walk-on is this school has recruited you in especially this is like more of a Division 1 thing, and they are out of scholarship money, for example, or they've used up those slots. But they can help with the admissions process, but you're going to be guaranteed a roster spot, but you would do it as a normal student, which means they'll help with admissions, which means they'll probably get you in, but you will go, the finances will be like a typical student, that you'll run it through typical financial aid requests.
Great. And then another question, the D1 coaches have a finite number of recruiting spots to use for admission. Is there a level of support underneath those spots that can help a student get in, which you touched on a little bit? And I would guess this depends on the level of the student applying.
Yeah, so it really depends. The big thing to realize it's spots. You know what I mean? So it depends on the school and all that. And this is even Division 3. Like, it's tricky because you're talking let's just use a nest cast. Let's use pick up Bowdoin, for example. If Bowdoin, each coach by their admissions office is basically given an amount of slots. So we'll get into this a little bit, which is called banding, and all that. So a football program example is going to gets more slots because they typically need more bodies than other sports. But like as a baseball level, they might only get to bring 4 or 5 slots a year at the end of the day. It could range a little bit up higher than that, but that's it. So what happens is they get to really target who they want, what kids they can get in. They'll get pre-reads with admissions. And then they also have a banding. They'll also, and they do this in the Ivy Leagues as well, they have a banding level. So what they'll do is, they'll call a kid, it's tricky, like a protect, for example, or it's like a likely. So the thing is that what would happen is if you were like looking at an SCAS school and I was recruiting your kid, it would be, I would run the transcript, SATs, et cetera, through admissions. Admissions would give me a read. I would then come back and they would say, okay, we'll take this kid, but this has to be one of your slots. Okay, this would be a protect type kid. So those run. Then you could have other kids as they go lower in the band, they'll run the number through admissions. And if the kid, say, for example, is a really strong student and they love the profile as a recruit, that kid can come in the band and they would be able to say they would fall where they can fill out the bottom of the class. The Ivies has a similar thing, which is like an AI. It's called the academic index. So they actually run, it's a formula between GPA, test scores, and all that. They come up with it actually spits out a number that tells you what each kid's AI is. And then depending on the AI is where you fall in their band. So again, the stronger academic profile and stronger athlete, your options are huge. The weaker academic profile, no matter how good you are, in certain levels, the major Division 1 level, that doesn't really matter because if you're a full scholarship kid, you only, like Nellie said, you just need to be eligible. But at the other academic school level, it's a big difference. So what will happen in the Ivies is you'll get banded. So sometimes kids who frankly are even in the Patriot League, like the Holy Crosses and places like that, Bucknell and those guys, you, Lafayette, you could be in a situation where you're a pretty good player, but if you're an unbelievable student, you actually might be on their recruit list because they are looking for what they call program players and bodies to fill out their list. And that way, if they can bring in a real strong kid academically, it really helps how it matches if they want to get that kid in who they think's a way better player, but isn't as strong as a student. They can kind of weigh that out. So if that helps, that's how that kind of works. Which I know it's kind of vague, but it is the way it goes.
Yeah. And do you mind talking about, I guess, how to begin the recruiting process if you have a sophomore or something like that that's interested in playing in college?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is, the biggest thing I would say about the whole process is make sure first of all, self-advocate. If this is something you as an athlete wants to do and the family wants to do, you need to self-advocate. You need to be in the right situations to be seen, to go through Nelly. I don't know how you're going to do it, Nelly, as far as if people can get them online. The resume stuff that you usually hand out.
Oh, yes. Actually, I'll put my email in the chat and that's true. I usually hand out like an athletics resume and maybe a timeline or something like that.
Yeah, there's a time. We have a timeline for you guys. It's like just to put up your athletic resume and things like that. So I would first and foremost, what I say to families is if the athlete wants to play at the next level or is hoping to, it doesn't matter when. They can be a sophomore, they can be a junior, whenever they decide they think they would like to pursue this. The big thing is first, I would recommend scheduling a meeting with your coach, whoever the coach is of the program. Our coaches overall are very experienced with this process. With Thayer, I've been at Thayer for 6 years now. I was at another private school, as most of you probably know, for a long time before that in the league. But over our 6 years, we've sent a lot of kids to the collegiate level in almost every single sport we offer. I think every single sport we offer. So they have experience in the process, and it's good for them to be in the know and start opening the dialogue with them as to what they can and can't do and how to go through the process. Because really, it's a sport to sport basis thing a little bit. There's certain things, say, if we were talking to Jeff Brown, who's our, sent kids all over the place for girls cross country and girls track. Track is a totally different process in cross country and how you get recruited than, say, baseball. Just use that example. So you need to, I can't go over every sport exactly, but you need to communicate, coach, what's the best thing. In general, what people are going to say is, your club teams, most of the sports, the soccers, the field hockeys now as club grows in field hockey, hockey, basketball, even to a degree, wrestling these days, baseball, lacrosse, those sports. In general, the clubs do play a big role because kids are doing this side, and the clubs are the ones that are working hand in hand with the actual high schools. So there's not a conflict, ideally, on our seasons. So that's why, as long as there's no conflict, I have no problem with the clubs. Because what they're doing is really just helping to get your child, better and or in position to be recruited. So there's the recruiting process that typically happens during Thayer seasons is, someone coming by, just check a game, or they have their eye on somebody, or there's some film exchange and things like that. But the showcase things and all that are typically out of Thayer season, which is where the clubs play a huge role. So the big thing is self-advocate. We talked about this resume, my expectations are our coaches are there for you. If they're not, make sure you call me right away or email me and we'll figure that out. But the biggest thing I say is, reach for the stars early. If you want to start with a huge list, because trust me, it's going to shrink. Go through it. If you do have, I mean, there's some kids, it's easy. Some kids like, I only want to be in the Northeast. Some kids like, I got to get out of Dodge. I want to go to warm weather. Some kids are, I don't care where I go as long as I get recruited. So I can't answer those questions. Those are family conversations. But the point is, you can start, you cast a big net. And what we recommend you do is you create an athletic resume, which on that we'll talk about who your coaches are, who you're playing for club, GPA, if you have any testing, your interest, things like that. You can also forward, as you know, at the varsity level, we film everything. So the kids have access to their huddle accounts, which for the most part, we film everything. And film is something that we use, we send. So I'll just give you like how I did it was, and this is what I recommend is I sat down with my daughter, who we had some interest, we sent out, we looked at all the schools in the country. Where do you think you'd be interested in? We created a Division I list, a Division II list, a Division III list. It was big. It takes some work. I said, all right, if you want, we're going to cast this big net. This goes back to our sophomore year, summer, because we started going to the bigger lacrosse showcases in the summer in Virginia and stuff like that. So we sent out a big net because we knew all those coaches would be there. And then it just started saying, all right, starting dialogue with those coaches. And then some like watched her play and were like, basically they're pretty honest, we're not interested, or we start still interested. And some really came out. And then as we started going through the process, we just really narrowed that down, and some other deeper conversations come into play like location, how much you like the coach, the school, what you want to study and all that. And eventually that really shrinks. But if you lollygag in the process, I call it, and you don't self-advocate and you don't start the dialogue with coaches, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of competition, and you need to get on their radar. And sometimes it's hard to hear they're not interested, but so what? Someone will be, And I also say in the recruiting process, it's really all in the eyes of the beholder. I mean, I've seen some kids get recruited at a very high level that other schools said were not interested. And it just was what that school is looking for. And sometimes it's positional. It's a lot of different things. But so that's the big thing. And then be leery of showcase. You're probably getting a lot of stuff from your clubs and things like that, that if you're in this process, that there's a lot now of showcase opportunities. And I'm not saying some of them aren't good. I can't go over all of them now. But again, your coach can help you as to, I call what's the bang for the buck. But there's a lot of people running high, expensive, come to our showcase and you're going to have all these college coaches, and be leery of that. I'm skeptical of a lot of them, is my point, that you're not going to get the bang for the buck, and be careful with that. So make sure you consult either me or your coach in regards to where they think the showcase and the real actual, where they know there's going to be college coaches present to be seen before you go out and spend a bunch of money. Any questions on that stuff?
Quick question on this is actually my question. If you're putting together the athletic resume and you've missed a season due to obviously due to COVID or possibly or something like, a summer, things like that, is that something you'd recommend, just making sure it's highlighted for example, for track, these were times my sophomore year, or obviously coaches are going to know that spring of 2020 was wiped away, but is that something you should make note of on the resume, or you think they are aware of that?
Yeah, I think it's important, where you are, it depends, it's tough on some kids because the recruiting process happens so early, but I think times are easy, and I would put them in year-wise because they're going to say, that should bump up. I just know that, for example, it can be tough sometimes when a lot of coaches ask for stats. And I've had some kids who were as a sophomore, very, very good players, but weren't playing a ton for me yet, but they were going to, so, it depends. It's a situational thing, what they're asking for. And as far as that goes, and typically a lot of coaches, the big thing is most of our coaches have good rapport. Our varsity coaches have good rapport with the collegiate coaches. So, for example, if I call a coach on a kid and say, this is a kid you want to keep an eye on, they're going to do that beyond you get those just general forms to sign. But if you do have some crazy stats, you definitely want to add them in your resume.
Great. So another question, has Thayer ever sent someone to college for crew?
Yes. Several.
Yeah, I know. I was like trying to think of specific examples, but then I'm like, oh, we're probably not supposed to say that. Great. And then another person had a question just about pressure building up in the process and the application process. And I would say whatever you can do to diffuse that for your child is going to be helpful. Your child's going to take their cues from you. So if you appear very stressed out about the situation, they're going to feel that. They get a lot of peer talk surrounding the process. So I think if you can play that down, that would be best. I'm never worried about a kid going to college, or like Rick said, if they want to play in college, we can find them a home. Like all of us can work together to find them a home. It's kind of when they have intersecting ideas where they may have to make a choice not to play in college or not. So, and I've had kids make that decision where they have some offers at certain colleges, but in the end, they really like this other college better, and they'll play club or intramural or something like that because they prefer to go to that other college. So, as in terms of the application process, college counseling, we are going to walk you and your child through that process. So don't worry about pressure around that. And I think just dealing with expectations is tough when could be kind of the first time in your child's life where they might not get what they want or their top choice. And I think helping them manage that expectation and helping them come down easy if it doesn't go their way and learn how to deal with disappointment is probably the most important thing that you can do, because there's going to be obviously other times in their lives when they're faced with those difficulties.
As far as too, like curiosity around where kids have gone, if you go to the Thayer website in the athletic page, you'll see the top Tiger section. And since I came to Thayer, we have in there a history of where all of our kids have gone over to play, committed to play, etc., over the past 5 years. So you can see it class by class where kids have gone and what schools they've gone to.
Great. And another question, if your child is a multi-sport athlete, how do you help them navigate the process? Well, which you have done with your daughter, right?
Yeah, and son. Yeah, they had. It depends on the sports. I found in my time. I mean, I love multidimensional athletes. In my day, playing in the privates in the ISL when I was playing a long time ago, that almost all the athletes played 3 sports. Frankly, it was just part of the culture. Club sports were basically non-existent then, maybe just starting in its infancy in hockey. But nowadays we don't see that as much. I'd say it's a little more, which is interesting. You probably see it a little bit more even on the girls' side, still the 3-sport athlete. But most of our top athletes, I would say, are playing 2 sports. And typically it works a little like around what their priority sport is. So if I were to take my daughter, for example, she played hockey and lacrosse. So she would then be able to play her lacrosse, her big lacrosse stuff while she was in high school was really in the summer. And she had some hockey in the summer, but then her big club league play was in the fall. So they kind of mixed well that she could pursue the club stuff where she was getting some exposure, seeing some things, deciding which sport she wanted to pursue at the next level without much conflict. That's typically, I'm finding, what people do. Football, like a kid who's a football player like my son, that's really kind of irrelevant because football doesn't really have club. You just go to some camps and stuff to be seen. Baseball, again, it's primarily summer stuff. And maybe some winter stuff, indoor workouts, but that's just small stuff in the winter, but it's primarily works off the summer schedule. like I say, it depends. It depends on the sports. It depends on the kids. But I think being a multi-sport athlete is the right way to go across the board. And I think it's just a matter of which sport you choose. And each sport's like a little bit different. Like typically, like for us in general, our hockey players, especially on the boys' side, do not play a fall sport at there, but they typically play a spring. That's because of the fall hockey. Soccer players in general don't play a spring sport at there in general. They'll look to pick up something in the winter because the club in soccer really picks up in the spring. So it's kind of a sport by sport thing, but I would recommend that, staying with a couple sports as long as you can, because I think overall it's just a better experience for the kid. And I think it's better for overall athletic development.
And we do rarely, but we did have two girls, and was it in the class of 2020, who ended up going to play D3 in both sports, right? Allie and Gabby. So sometimes work out.
So it depends. Some are playing. Some kids do that. We're gonna have a kid this year do that. It's tough. I mean, it's a good question. It's great. I mean, I see how it plays out. I think they'll find it difficult. Even Division I level, that basically doesn't exist anymore. That you could play two in college, but at the Division III level, it does, and it typically depends on the sport. It's not easy though. It's typically a fall spring match. If you do something in the fall, they typically match with the spring. Sometimes I've seen people, certain sports, like I'll use baseball again, that when I played in college, I had some really, really good pitchers on our program that were unbelievable basketball players. They're like 6'4" guys, and they also were big basketball players. And they played basketball and baseball, but it was easier for them because they could just get their arm in shape during basketball season still. They didn't have to do what the rest of us were doing as far as indoor stuff. But it's not easy to navigate, but it does happen.
Great. Any other questions? And you can interrupt too. You don't have to put them in the chat if you want to. Good. Oh, hold on. How can they get access to Huddle?
They have access. The coaches will all of them get access to it. It goes through the roster, and they should all have it through their coach, et cetera. What sport specifically?
You can unmute now.
Soccer.
Okay.
Yeah. So boys,
Girls.
Yeah. So they should have access through Nick. If they don't, then make sure you can just email Nick, or you can email me, and we'll make sure you get access right away.
So, and you think they taped a couple of the games this year?
At the varsity, yes. At the varsity level, we taped everything we did, even the black oranges.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Great. Any other questions? Obviously, you should also feel free to contact me or Rick if you have any questions you think about kind of later. Being in touch, obviously, with your child's coach at Thayer and club. But basically, I think the main thing is keeping everyone informed, because we're all going to work to help you in this process and help your child navigate it. Great. So I guess if there are no other questions, it was great to virtually see everyone. This is probably our highest turnout, because usually it's more of kind of a nice conversation. We've got pastries and things like that, but still great to see you. And this will be recorded, so we will have it, probably put it in the TNN or via email for families that did miss it. So if you have someone that wanted to come and couldn't make it, we will have a recording of it.
And please feel free. Thank you, everybody. But, sometimes in these things, if you come up with a question down the road, you're not sure about something, just shoot me an email anytime, and I'll get right back to you and help as best I can. Like I said, it's a complex process. There's a lot to digest from level to level, et cetera, et cetera. But, we're happy to help any way we can.
One last question. Any update on winter sports?
Oh, God.
No.
Coming out soon, yes.
Yeah.
We're hopeful. We're hopeful. Our goal right now, to be honest, I'll tell you, I'm hoping to have the winter information letter that I send out, the information letters I send out, I'm hoping to have that email blast out by Friday, as long as everything I want to do is approved. But our goal right now is to start winter sports December 7th, and we'll run winter sports the first 2 weeks before break, and go from there. There's just some ISL guidelines that have not been finalized yet. And also even at the MIAA level, we're still waiting on their overall sport modifications to come out, which we hopefully will have by Friday. So, to see where that is with the EEA and the DESE. So, we're going to do our best. I want to get those kids out there. I miss seeing them play.
Great. Well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.